In the shadowed glow of a lavish dining room, where crystal glasses clinked like fragile warnings, I sat frozen as my uncle's voice sliced through the air. He was about to steal everything I'd built, my life's work, my future, handing it to his worthless son on a silver platter. But under the table, my fingers danced on a hidden screen, poised to unleash a digital storm that would shatter his empire. One tap away from revenge, I held my breath, wondering if tonight I'd finally break free or destroy us all. Analysis of original story key plot points. Uncle Wallace announces handing over Cantha's AI project to his son Otis at a family dinner, presents a non-compete, and guilts her using past family debt. Cantha secretly revokes their admin access via phone under the table and leaves calmly. Background. Cantha's parents were saved from bankruptcy by Wallace 20 years ago, leading to lifelong manipulation. Otis always took opportunities from her. Next day. Otis and Wallace demand access. She ignores them. She's prepared financially with savings and a lawyer. She discovers old emails revealing Wallace sabotaged her parents' business, not saved it. Wallace's desperation. Needs Otis to take credit for AI to become CEO. Wallace breaks into her old laptop, finds a fake AI folder, honeypot, and sends it anonymously to sabotage her startup funding. This triggers her trap, gathering evidence of espionage. Deposition. Lawyer reveals voided non-compete, old emails proving fraud. Her father reacts violently, cutting ties. Wallace indicted, sentenced to prison, fined, Otis blacklisted. Wallace sends guilt letter from prison. She shreds it. Cantha's new life. Successful startup, healed family. Moral lessons. Rules against family narcissists, psychology of manipulation, slot machine effect, strategies for defense. Characters. Cantha, narrator, 38, lead engineer. Intelligent, resilient, strategic. Breaks free from manipulation. Uncle Wallace, narcissistic, manipulative patriarch, sabotaged family, uses guilt. Otis, incompetent, entitled son, beneficiary of favoritism. Cantha's mother, fearful, compliant, urges peace. Cantha's father, broken by guilt but awakens to rage. Lawyer, sharp, instrumental in takedown. Twists. Revelation that Wallace caused the bankruptcy, not saved them. Honeypot trap on laptop leading to Wallace's self-incrimination. Father's explosive awakening and cutting ties. Wallace's prison letter attempt at manipulation fails. Suspense. Opportunities and tension building. Build tension through internal thoughts. Cantha's simmering rage, calculated calm during dinner, anxiety of discovery. Slow builds. Dinner scene with silent actions under table. Waiting for calls/texts. Auditing emails with growing dread/realization. Emotional depth. Flashbacks to childhood thefts, parents' fear. Contrast with her empowerment. Cliffhangers in parts. End parts mid-revelation or action. Immersive narration. Sensory details, sounds, touches, visuals, psychological insights for drama. The rewrite will enhance suspense by adding descriptive language, inner monologues, paced reveals, without altering any events or outcomes. Suspense-packed hook. In the shadowed glow of a lavish dining room, where crystal glasses clinked like fragile warnings, I sat frozen as my uncle's voice sliced through the air. He was about to steal everything I'd built, my life's work, my future, handing it to his worthless son on a silver platter. But under the table, my fingers danced on a hidden screen, poised to unleash a digital storm that would shatter his empire. One tap away from revenge, I held my breath, wondering if tonight I'd finally break free or destroy us all. Part 1. The chime of Uncle Wallace's crystal wine glass echoed like a death knell across the opulent dining room. The chatter died instantly, leaving only the faint hum of the chandelier lights above. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady drumbeat against the exhaustion that clung to me like a second skin. For 3 grueling weeks, I'd survived on nothing but bitter black coffee, my eyes burning from endless nights wrestling with crashing servers to keep his sprawling company afloat. Now, here he was, the man who'd lorded over my family for decades, clearing his throat with theatrical precision. He announced it with the smug certainty of a king bestowing a crown. Full control of my artificial intelligence project, my creation, my sweat and genius poured into code, was going to his son, Otis. The same Otis who'd flunked 3 basic job interviews in the past month, stumbling over questions any intern could answer. A heavy thud jarred me as a thick sheaf of paper slammed onto the polished mahogany table before me. The non-compete agreement stared up like a noose, its clauses designed to choke my career for years. Wallace's eyes bored into mine, cold and unyielding, as he reminded the room, in that low, gravelly tone that brooked no argument, how he'd rescued my parents from bankruptcy 2 decades ago. The words hung in the air, thick with implied debt, a chain he'd forged and never let us forget. Beside me, my mother's hand trembled as it clutched my sleeve, her fingers digging in with desperate urgency. She leaned close, her breath hot and frantic against my ear. "Please, Cantha," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "Just apologize. Keep the peace. We owe him everything." Her words twisted in my gut, a familiar knife of guilt and obligation. But something inside me had shifted, hardened over years of watching this play out. I set my silver fork down with deliberate care, the soft clink barely audible in the suffocating silence. Locking eyes with Wallace, I drew a slow, measured breath, forcing my racing pulse to steady. My hands rested perfectly still in my lap, betraying nothing. But beneath the heavy linen tablecloth, shrouded in shadow, my thumb brushed the cool screen of my phone. The device unlocked with a silent vibration, its interface glowing faintly in the dark. My mind raced through the steps I'd rehearsed in secret midnight sessions, 3 precise taps to access the cloud infrastructure portal. Fingers trembling just slightly now, I navigated to the master control list, scanning for the global administrator accounts belonging to Otis and Wallace. There they were, glowing entries that represented their unchecked power over the system I'd built from scratch. Swipe left. Revoke access. A confirmation prompt flickered, and I hesitated for a heartbeat. Visions of fallout flashing, furious calls, legal threats, the unraveling of my carefully constructed life. But the weight of 20 years pressed down, fueling me. Confirm. The system executed the command in an instant, a digital guillotine falling without a sound. Pushing my chair back, I let the wooden leg scrape harshly against the ornate floor, the screech piercing the tension like a scream. Heads turned, eyes widening in confusion. I rose smoothly, brushing invisible wrinkles from my dress, my posture a mask of composure. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said, my voice even, laced with a quiet finality that sent a ripple through the room. Then, I turned on my heel and strode toward the front door, each step echoing my liberation. The cool night air rushed over my face as I stepped outside, carrying away the stale scent of entitlement and fear. For the first time in hours, maybe years, the agonizing pressure in my chest eased, like a vice finally loosening. My name is Kantha. At 38, I'd spent the last decade as the lead systems engineer, the invisible force keeping this family's corporate empire alive and thriving. But to them, I was never an equal, never a visionary. I was just the daughter of debtors, a perpetual obligation. Flashbacks clawed at my mind as I walked to my car. Childhood memories of Otis's tantrums, his demands for my hard-won science fair projects, or my coveted college recommendation slots. My mother, always the peacemaker, would wrench them from my grasp, her hands shaking, eyes flicking nervously toward Wallace's imposing office door. "Just let him have it," she'd hiss, her voice laced with terror. "Remember what your uncle did for us. We owe him our lives." For 20 years, my parents had haunted their own existence. Ghosts bowed under the weight of that rescue. Wallace had swooped in during their bankruptcy, buying their failing business for mere pennies and painting himself as a heroic savior. But gratitude, I'd learned, was the cruelest shackle. Disguising extortion as benevolence, eroding self-worth until you believed you deserved the chains. Now, Wallace had misjudged me fatally. He thought he could wield that same guilt to seize my multi-million-dollar AI system, handing it to a spoiled boy who couldn't even reset his own email password. But in his arrogance, he'd forgotten. I was the architect of the digital fortress he sought to imprison me in. I held the master keys. The morning after, sunlight filtered through my kitchen window as I savored my first real cup of coffee in weeks. My phone buzzed insistently on the counter, a text from Otis. No greeting, no remorse for the humiliation at dinner. Just a barrage of question marks, followed by a curt demand. "Fix the internal developer portal, now. Board meeting in an hour." I stared at the screen, a faint smile tugging at my lips. No reply. I watched the typing bubble dance frantically, appear, disappear, a digital echo of his growing panic. Then came the call from Wallace. The ringtone blared, insistent and ominous. I let it ring, imagining his fury building with each unanswered tone. Voicemail chimed, and his voice growled through the speaker, teeth audibly grinding. Threats of an empty severance package, vows to leave me penniless if I didn't restore access immediately. He was trying to starve me out, banking on desperation to drive me back begging within days. But Wallace was trapped in the past, playing a game from 20 years ago. He didn't know I'd spent the last month in quiet preparation, anticipating this very confrontation. I'd liquidated my retirement savings, secured a private loan against my car, enough cash to sustain me for 6 months. More crucially, I'd wired a $50,000 retainer to a razor-sharp lawyer who specialized in eviscerating corporate tyrants like him. While his threats echoed in my empty voicemail, I sat in my home office, delving into a meticulous audit of the legacy servers he'd rushed me to migrate to the cloud last month. Cost-cutting, he'd demanded, speed over thoroughness. In his haste, he'd overlooked something buried deep. Corrupted files from 2004, archives I wasn't meant to uncover. My cursor hovered over the file, a knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach. Click. The index rebuilt slowly, 3 agonizing minutes ticking by as progress bars inched forward. When it opened, a chill seeped into my veins, freezing the air in my lungs. These weren't just bankruptcy records. Dozens of emails unfolded between Wallace and a senior bank loan officer, damning threads where he'd whispered poison, labeling my father a liability, orchestrating the credit line's collapse to force foreclosure. Then, like a vulture, he'd saved them, snapping up assets for 30 cents on the dollar. The benevolent uncle demanding eternal gratitude was the arsonist who'd ignited the blaze. My hands shook as the truth sank in, a wave of nausea mixing with surging fury. This wasn't mere malice. It was calculated theft, the foundation of his empire built on our ruin. Meanwhile, the board was pressuring Wallace to retire. Company growth stagnant, his leadership questioned. Desperation fueled his grab for my AI. Let Otis claim it as his vision, secure the CEO vote, preserve the bloodline. I held the proof now, a ticking bomb in digital form. By Tuesday, Wallace's frustration peaked. Locked out of the cloud servers, his bluster useless against ironclad encryption, he resorted to brute force. He snatched my abandoned company laptop from my old desk, hired a sketchy tech contractor, and brute forced the local login. There, on the desktop, sat an unsecured folder labeled Fennel Artificial Intelligence Core version 1. He pounced, arrogance blinding him to the obvious trap. Believing me a sloppy amateur, he crafted an anonymous email from a burner account, attaching the folder, and fired it off to the venture capital firm poised to fund my independent startup with $2.5 million. The message? A venomous accusation of stolen proprietary code, threatening lawsuits if they proceeded. Back in my kitchen, my phone vibrated with a custom security alert. I snatched it up, scanning the notification, and a low, triumphant laugh escaped my lips. Wallace, the self-proclaimed genius, had walked straight into my web. Wallace had always believed he was the sharpest mind in every room, the untouchable strategist who saw moves 10 steps ahead. That arrogance had blinded him completely. He never paused to question why a woman who'd spent her career designing impenetrable enterprise security systems would leave her most valuable asset, an entire AI core, sitting naked on a corporate laptop desktop. He never considered that the folder named Fennel Artificial Intelligence Core version 1 was anything but careless oversight. It was a honeypot, a meticulously crafted digital trap. The instant his shady contractor double-clicked the file, invisible watermarks activated like silent sentinels. Embedded trackers fired up, logging every detail. The exact IP address of the machine in Wallace's corner office, the MAC address of the laptop, the precise timestamp of the breach, even screenshots of the screen as the files were copied and attached to the anonymous email. All of it beamed straight to my private, air-gapped server in under 2 seconds. No alarms, no pop-ups, no trace on their end. Just a clean, irrefutable chain of evidence tying the act of corporate espionage directly to him. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the incoming diagnostic report flooding my screen. Lines of metadata scrolled past like a confession written in code. My pulse stayed calm, almost serene. This wasn't rage anymore. This was justice clicking into place with mechanical precision. Across town, Wallace reclined in his oversized leather chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, that familiar patronizing smirk curling his lips. He was certain his anonymous burner email had already torpedoed my future. The venture capitalists would drop me like radioactive waste the moment they read the theft accusation. He pictured me bankrupt, broken, crawling back to beg for scraps. Otis lounged beside him, scrolling mindlessly on his phone, bored by what he assumed was just another routine power play. The deposition room felt colder than it should have, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and unspoken dread. My parents sat across the long table, shoulders hunched, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. My mother's hands twisted together endlessly, knuckles white. Her eyes flicked toward me in silent, frantic pleading, still believing we were the ones in the wrong, still chained by 20 years of manufactured obligation. My lawyer didn't bother with small talk. He slid a single crisp sheet of paper across the table and tapped it once with his pen. In a voice flat and unemotional, he cited the exact state labor statute. By deliberately withholding my final severance payment beyond the legal deadline, the company had automatically voided the non-compete agreement. Wallace's smirk flickered, then hardened into a thin line. He opened his mouth to protest. He never got the words out. A heavy binder slammed onto the table with enough force to make the water glasses jump. My lawyer flipped it open and fanned out a thick stack of printed emails from 2004, each page bearing Wallace's unmistakable signature and the bank officer's replies. The room went deathly still. Immediate filing of a shareholder derivative suit, my lawyer announced, his tone clinical. For gross breach of fiduciary duty, corporate sabotage, and fraud. The color drained from Wallace's face so rapidly, it looked like someone had pulled a plug. His eyes darted across the pages, searching frantically for an escape hatch that didn't exist. His breathing turned shallow, ragged. His hand reached out to snatch one of the documents, but his fingers trembled so violently the paper slipped away and fluttered to the floor. I watched the untouchable patriarch unravel in real time. The benevolent mask he'd worn for decades cracked wide open, revealing the desperate, cornered thief beneath. My father, silent until now, leaned forward. He pulled the incriminating stack away from Wallace's shaking grasp. He adjusted his reading glasses with deliberate slowness and began to read. One line, then another. His face remained unreadable at first. Then something shifted. Deep lines of pain and realization carved themselves deeper into his features. 20 years of brainwashing shattered in front of me like glass under a hammer. The forced apologies at every holiday, the endless holidays spent serving Wallace like royalty, the suffocating myth of a debt that had dictated every family decision, every dream deferred, every opportunity stolen from me and handed to Otis. All of it crystallized into something raw and furious. Veins bulged against my father's collar. His hands curled into fists so tight the knuckles blanched. Without a word, he stood. His chair crashed backward onto the carpet with a muffled thud. He seized the heavy glass water pitcher from the center of the table and hurled it with all his strength. It sailed past Wallace's head and exploded against the far wall in a violent cascade of shards and water. Glass rained down like jagged confetti. Otis yelped and scrambled out of his seat, nearly tripping over his own feet. Wallace shrank into his chair, arms flying up instinctively to shield his face, terror flashing in his eyes for the first time I could ever remember. My father grabbed my mother's hand, his grip firm, protective. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw something I hadn't seen since I was a child. Fierce, unfiltered pride burning in his gaze. Then he turned to Wallace, who was still cowering under a glittering spray of broken glass. "We are done," my father spat, each word dripping venom. He turned his back on the man who had ruined his life. The puppets had finally severed their own strings. The gavel came down with a final, resounding thud that seemed to echo through the courtroom like the closing of a long-shut door. Wallace stood before the federal judge, no longer the imperious patriarch, but a diminished figure in an ill-fitting suit. The indictment had been swift and merciless. 3 counts of federal wire fraud, 2 counts of corporate espionage, each charge built on the digital trail he'd left in his arrogance: the honeypot breach, the anonymous email, the forged accusations meant to destroy me. The sentence landed like a hammer. 4 years in a federal correctional institution, plus a mandatory restitution order of $2,500,000 payable to the shareholders he had systematically defrauded over decades. As the bailiffs moved to escort him away, Wallace's eyes met mine for one last time. There was no remorse there, only a flicker of stunned disbelief. Like a man who'd spent his life rigging games, suddenly realizing the house had finally won. The social fallout was immediate and total. Within 48 hours, the prestigious country club that had once displayed his framed portrait revoked his membership with a curt one-line letter. The board of directors scrubbed his name from every company history page, annual report, and corporate timeline, as though he had never existed. Relatives who once competed to sit nearest him at Sunday dinners suddenly suffered convenient memory lapses whenever his name surfaced in conversation. The empire of influence he'd built crumbled overnight, brick by carefully placed brick. Otis fared no better. Stripped of his unearned executive title and obscene salary, he discovered the tech industry had a long memory. His name became synonymous with nepotism and incompetence. He now struggled to clear even the most basic phone screenings for entry-level help desk positions, roles he once would have sneered at. Each rejection, I imagined, carried the faint echo of that dinner table where he'd been handed my life's work on a silver platter. 6 months after the trial, a thin white envelope arrived at my new office. The return address was stark: a federal prison facility. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable. Wallace's careful, slanted script, the same one that had signed those damning 2004 emails. I opened it slowly, almost curiously. The first page dripped with calculated nostalgia. Fond recollections of my childhood birthdays, vague mentions of family traditions, heavy emphasis on his failing health. Page after page preached forgiveness, reconciliation, the sacred bonds of blood. He leaned hard on the old strings of guilt, the same ones that had kept my parents compliant for 20 years. It was a masterclass in manipulation, delivered from behind bars. My pulse didn't quicken. My hands stayed steady. I read every word without flinching, then folded the pages neatly in half. I crossed the room to the paper shredder, fed the letter in, and listened to the low, satisfying hum as it devoured his final attempt at control. The empty envelope followed into the recycling bin. I returned to my desk, the silence of the office wrapping around me like a warm blanket. Beautiful, absolute, earned. Today, my life looks nothing like the one I left behind. My startup occupies a bright second-floor suite with floor-to-ceiling glass windows that flood the space with afternoon sunlight. Whiteboards line the walls, covered in diagrams and half-finished ideas from a team of brilliant, dedicated developers who follow me because they respect what I've built, not because of obligation or fear. We laugh here. We argue passionately about code. We celebrate small wins with coffee runs and bad jokes. This is chosen family. My parents come every Friday for lunch. My father brings fresh pastries from the little bakery near their house, still warm in the paper bag. My mother's laughter, bright, unguarded, genuine, fills the room now. I had never heard that sound during my entire childhood. It had been buried under layers of anxiety and deference. Watching them now, relaxed and present, I realize how deeply the chains had cut. They're healing, slowly, one real conversation at a time. If you're watching this narration and you feel that familiar, heavy sinking in your chest every time a certain relative's name lights up your phone, listen closely. Family narcissists don't love you. They love the power of watching you bow. Here are the 3 rules I internalized the hard way. Rule 1. Blood does not make you family. Loyalty does. Genetics are an accident. Mutual respect is non-negotiable. Anyone who demands a seat at your table without earning it can stay standing. Rule 2. Your silence in the face of manipulation isn't patience, it's complicity. Yielding boundaries to keep the peace is an open invitation for more exploitation. They will never honor a line you refuse to defend. Rule 3. Beware the trap of gratitude. A gift changed to lifelong control isn't kindness, it's extortion. Never surrender your life's direction to someone who constantly reminds you what they did for you. That night at the anniversary dinner, I thought I was detonating my entire family. In truth, I was swinging a sledgehammer at an invisible cage, freeing not just myself, but the people trapped inside with me. Look at your own life. What invisible chains of gratitude are still wrapped around your neck? Who holds a past favor like a weapon to keep you small? You are allowed, required even, to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share DNA. Share your own survival stories in the comments. Take your power back. Cut the toxic ties. Breathe your own air. Wow, what a ride. I know what you're screaming at the screen right now. Why did her parents stay loyal for 20 years? Why did Kantha endure a decade of building an empire for an uncle who treated her like dirt? It's easy to judge from the outside, but psychologists call it the slot machine effect, intermittent reinforcement. Toxic manipulators don't torment you constantly. If they did, escape would be obvious. Instead, they drop unpredictable crumbs, a rare compliment, a sudden favor, endless reminders of that one time they saved you. You keep pulling the lever, hoping for genuine love, but you only get pennies. Kantha and her parents weren't weak. They were neurologically hooked on a rigged game. When she finally broke free, she ran a masterclass in self-defense. She built the case quietly, revoking access, setting the honeypot, letting arrogance do the rest. She followed the receipts, auditing those old servers, uncovering the sabotage in cold, hard emails. She financed her own liberation, liquidating savings, hiring the shark lawyer, refusing to wait for rescue. The verdict is simple. Toxic manipulators thrive on your fear, isolation, and misplaced gratitude. The moment you switch to cold facts and iron boundaries, their empire collapses. Your peace, your talent, your future, they're worth far more than any fake debt to a fraudulent savior. If you've ever cut ties with a toxic family member, a manipulative boss, or anyone who weaponized guilt to trap you, drop your story below. Hit subscribe for more breakdowns on surviving psychological warfare. And remember, never let anyone guilt trip you out of your own greatness.